Ecclesiastes 4:4-16 tells us that a man's envy of his neighbor is what drives him chase after the win and success of this world. I think it's interesting because we talk about competition. Some people see it as good, some people see it as bad. But today I'm going to show you that through Ecclesiastes in this two-part series, Ecclesiastes 4, we're going to be looking at what really is going on is this new world order is changing rapidly through competition. Countries competing with countries, but also us as Christians competing with each other, which we need to be careful. Let's get started. Everybody, welcome to Reason for Truth. I'm your host, Stevie Garofalo. Reason for Truth. Truth comes first. Reasons come last. But we're always constantly learning. So we stop learning, we stop teaching, or at least stop teaching well. And then what happens? We stop learning well. So welcome to Reason for Truth. King Solomon, the wealthiest and perhaps the most successful man in the Bible, wrote about the futility of various circumstances of life in the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, Solomon built cities. He had many wives, concubines, servants. The guy built cities, had more gold and silver than you can count, and he accomplished many things during his lifetime. God really raised him up and blessed him. The question is, what is it all worth? So despite all he had, Solomon concluded at the end of his life when he wrote Ecclesiastes. By the way, most people don't realize that. Ecclesiastes was written at the end of his life, so he can look back. It's a big difference if you ask a 100-year-old man a question and you ask a 20-year-old man a question. They're going to give you very different answers because the 20-year-old man is looking forward. The old man is looking back with wisdom and experience. Looking back, all its toil, Solomon's saying, man, all this work he put in, all the things he accomplished. So what does man gain, he asks for? This is what he asks. What does man gain from all his toil in which he toils under the sun? Ecclesiastes 1:3. And the previous verse 1:2 gives us the bottom line answer, which is vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. It's all vanity. In other words, you don't take it with you. You enjoy building it as much as you do once you've built it. You're like, what's next? All right, I'm bored and depressed. Ecclesiastes 1:2. Go ahead and read that. Can you imagine accomplishing all these great worldly things that Solomon did in your life, only to conclude that it's all vanity? And in order to understand the totality and the significance of Solomon's telling us, let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 4 as a whole, what it looks like broken down. Because we're getting at one verse, which we're going to get to, which Solomon points out that it's really the envy of our neighbor, of someone else, that causes us to compete and to get up off our duff. And it's true, while we don't like the pressure of competition, it makes us better. If we're real honest, that is the truth. Well, he can't have that. I got to do something more. In other words, he'd be sitting there like a lump on the log. I personally believe that this is part of the problem of the federal government because you just, by nature, it's not that bad people work there. Some are bad, some are good. But they come into an environment where there's really no standard outside of don't do something like murder somebody. You got the union, you're not going to get fired. But, I was just watching an article. 1990, they put in a 5-year goal. They put all this money to update the IRS software. It was supposed to be done in 1995. We're in 2025. It's still 5 years away. I just saw it on the news. Why? You could say, well, that's just because inefficiencies. Well, exactly. That's why they put in Doge. But the bottom line is it's all corruption. But there's no standards, right? And what happens if you don't meet your deadline in a business like that? You would be fired instantly. In the government, just keep pushing it on another 5 years. But let's look at what Solomon's saying broken down. He talks about oppression by the oppressors in chapter 4. I'm going to go ahead, 1-3. And then he talks about work and the worth of all your toil. There is some value in it, 4-12. It's not like it's all toil from the sense of it's how you look at it, right? And if you look at it from eternal perspective, it's got great value. It can. Number 3, political success. He talks about that in 4:13-16. But before we go further, I want to note that from my observations, it tells me something about the times we live in and that human governments are oppressive. Listen, they've always been oppressive. They're always going to be oppressive. Why? Because they want to live life in comfort. It's one human being who has learned that, hey, I control the purse strings and the power, so I want to live the way I want to live. And I'm going to kind of feel better, give some people, welfare, or hire you have a massive government so everyone thinks like me. But they don't really have to work that hard because we just extract it out of the masses. That's just really what this boils down to. It's very selfish. It's very immoral. And I think from that perspective, you know that going into work for the government, you should not take that job. I would say that's immoral. And if you know once you get in there that that's the case, you ought to leave, because it's a waste of what God has got for your life, and it's immoral money you're taking. And then you're going to get paid a pension that's extracted on top, so you're making it twice as much. I'm telling you, when you get to heaven, God's going to hold you an account of that, or what you do with that. I'm not saying all government workers are bad or evil or even lazy. I'm just saying that's the general rule of state and federal government in the modern age. Not when my father worked there in the 60s and 70s. Federal government, it was another thing. It really was truly working hard for your living. And you didn't get paid a lot like they do today. So they want to have a ruling class, in most cases, living a life of privilege, eating the best at restaurants. You see that with the politicians. They just love to be, they're like Pharisees. In reality, they don't really want to be subjected to the stress of work the way we are. Oh, well, I work long hours. Well, their idea is going to the gala at 7 o'clock at night, having a lunch meeting at 12, and then having a session of Congress. Man, that ain't, with no pressures of really having to lose your job over what you did. You could say, well, they won't be elected. Well, they're not elected if they don't tout the party line, not really the results they get as much. But, listen, the bottom line is stress and work are synonymous. Remember, you can go to Genesis in chapter 4, 4 to 12. God mandated through Genesis, remember, that man would work by what? The sweat of his brow. And there would be some oppression there. In reality, it's the challenges, it's the difficulties, and sometimes the oppression that we begin to see the value of our work, both good and bad. And it's through oppression that political success is derived, right? And when the oppressed people want a liberator, if that liberator is good, meaning he believes that the lie in the Bible and the values of the scriptures, he can become more of a liberator. But it's up to all people to support that and to do the right thing. And then you'll get people leaders that reflect that. So most leaders sadly worship themselves or whatever else, and they're very selfish. They think too highly of themselves. They really get a bit. I come from the D.C. area. The first question you're always asked, even in the church, what do you do for a living? That's how you're ranked, right? Everybody wants to know how to network. And, it's easy to do with someone else's money, right? It leads to suppression of people without. So when a leader suppresses others, that person sees themselves as superior and above the subjects. In the United States, we have what is called the civil servants. My father, again, my mom said, your father was a civil servant, Department of the Navy, downtown Washington, D.C. This means his job was to serve its citizens in the United States before himself. And in his era, he was able to do that job well. As a government civil servant. So sadly today, the government no longer serves its people or its citizens, generally speaking, but its citizens have to be made subjects to the government, and as such, the average citizen is expected to work hard, taxed even harder, and to boot expected to pay for government employees' retirement plans for working for 25 years. It used to be a saying, I put my time in. Everybody puts their time in. If you start working for 20 and you're in the private sector 25 years later, you don't get any pension. So, nobody deserves that. That's just a bad deal that the government gave. And I hate to say it, it's at some point it's going to fall apart because it's attached to the market. And if the market fails, all those pensions are going to fail. Federal government can just print up more money, create more inflation, but that's a different discussion. Insider trading, by the way, you ever heard of that insider trading? It's when you kind of know information that's about where a stock's going to go in the stock market. That's a federal offense. And we've seen people in the corporate world go to prison for that, literally go to jail or prison or charged. But politicians, guess what? It's not illegal for them to use insider information. So how does Nancy Pelosi, worth over $100 million, I've heard up to $300 million, how does that happen as a representative of the people? That's called corruption, not capitalism. And I call it corruption and capitalism because that's what it is. She's over 80 years old now. She came in the other day, the first time into Congress a few weeks ago, or a couple months ago, rather. First time without her stiletto heels on. She's Italian. What a shame. The real disgrace, I think. Immoral lady, her husband as well. And she's 80 years old. Where's she going? Rapidly nowhere, right? She's going to soon meet Jesus face to face. And I have the feeling that if she doesn't turn to him, which I hope she does, but if she doesn't, she's going to find out real quickly that all that ice cream she ate during COVID and all the money she took is going to be very much not worth it in the sense of eternity. Anyways, I'm going to go past that. The rapid changes that America is facing now under the new administration, wow, we're seeing corruption, bankruptcy, everything's being dealt with. Because listen, everything's very close to collapsing. That's why the question, is it going to be a soft landing or a hard landing? We talk about that, but that's true. And, we have a better chance now for a soft landing and then to rebuild from there. But it doesn't need to be that way. It didn't need to be that way. It's a greed, lust, and desire for more power. If it had been kept in check, we wouldn't be here. Sure, the responsibility falls on everybody, everyday citizen, because we vote in these people, right, who become the oppressor. We become the oppressed, they become the oppressors. King Solomon makes one simple point for both the oppressor and the oppressed, and that is simply that life is short, and selfish ambition, wrongful competition, serves only to breed selfish ambition and corruption. Selfishness. You either rule out of selflessness, which is for the people, or selfishness for yourself. Ecclesiastes 4:4-6 in the ESV says it this way. Then I saw that all toil and all skill and work come from a man's envy of his neighbor. It's competition. This also is vanity and a striving after the wind. The fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. Better is a handful of quietness than a handful of toil and striving after the wind. We're going to break that out more in the part 2. But the bottom line is competition's good. But we're going to talk about overworking, can be not good. Verse 4 depicts the skillful worker who's motivated by competition, becomes a workaholic for nothing. So we want to work hard. We want to get better because he made a better widget. Well, I'm going to work on a better widget, as long as you do so ethically and don't steal his ideas. That's number one. On the other hand, verse 5 pictures the opposite extreme in that a lazy person who does not work at all, once he eats his own flesh, that's what it says, he starves to death out of their lack of motivation. The reason is because back in the days of Jesus, if you didn't work, you didn't eat. If you were lazy, you didn't eat. So there you have it. If you oppress others, making them vassals to serve you, and it means a job that you're getting paid to do and then you're doing nothing, you are oppressing others because you're putting pressure on others who are more productive. So that's basically what it happens. We have lazy pursuits, and we have those who work hard, and we have those who work hard. And we're going to talk more about avoiding the pressure and getting more balance in part 2. But listen, and finally, the political class, I want to say one thing, emerges through political success, which not only entails but mandates increasing oppression and forcing others to work for the political class. It's not good. It's going to be we could talk a little bit more about balancing that into the next episode. And this is why competition, as difficult as it may seem, as long as it's kept within reason and done so ethically and morally according to biblical edicts, is essential to keeping mankind's and womankind's greed and power in check, allowing every person fair, equal opportunity to serve. Make more money. They do. Don't make it your God. Get paid fairly for working hard and succeed according to his or her merit, their giftedness, their skill sets, and their drive, right? Get up and go. Get up early and get it done and do it well and learn. And as opposed to being oppressed at the hand of the ruling class. So in our next episode, again, we're going to go to look at King Solomon says about balancing success. What does that mean? Solomon's going to tell us. So make sure you subscribe to this channel. Consejo Sinistro, as I always said, bam, Italian right hook. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode. This is your Reason for Truth for today.